Hi folks, Joe Bongiovanni here from the Kettle Pond Institute for Debt-Free Money, and this is the first video that I'm making with where I'm going to try to tie in my having been expunged from existence at Naked Capitalism by Yves Smith, the owner of the Naked Capitalism blog, and my dialogue with regards to MMT, over the years and as always, basically because I'm a Saudi school monetary reformer, okay, that pretty much everything that I propose to do to change the money system is found on the workings of Dr. Frederick Sadi. Um, and when asked by my friend Pete Young, when we were doing Coffee with Joe videos about what is it about chartalism, that neo-chartalism, or modern monetary theory, that I find it attractive enough to spend any time researching it, and explained to him that there were two things about modern monetary theory that are in common with even the Saudi school. And first would be that the recognition. Now, here's kind of a bit of a riddle here, but the recognition that in a sovereign fiat money system, the government has the power to create the money. That's given. It's given. And then B, more to their magnanimous purposes with regard to the well-being and public good and all that, that a sovereign people should be using that sovereign money system for the purpose of bringing about that well-being. Okay, so in other words, the money system is not something that's out there and that happens, but it's something that's managed towards our well-being. So with that in mind, I studied it, and but I was always having problems with their interpretations of how those things fit together. So in April of 2010, and that's now not too far off from being 4 years ago, okay, I attended the MMT teach-in on fiscal sustainability at George Washington University, which was a counter conference to the Peterson groups that they were holding on that day, in which they came out with their report about why austerity is the only thing that's going to fix anything. And of course, modern monetary theory comes to exactly the opposite conclusion, with which I concur. I met Joe Firestone there, if you remember, and I listened to a lot of the speeches by, if I can remember right, Marshall Auerbach, Bill Mitchell, Randy Ray. Was Stephanie Kelton there? I think Stephanie Kelton was there, and Chernova. I'm pretty sure those were the speakers. But there came a point in time after everybody had spoken when everybody kept talking about, well, this is what we could do if we had the money system operating in our favor. And basically, I agreed with all of that, because what they basically said was, we don't have to really worry about deficits, and the government has the power to create the money, etc., etc. But there were these self-imposed constraints. These are the things that they kept saying, but we could do that if it weren't for the self-imposed constraints. They just kept saying that. Everybody kept saying that. So I raised my hand, and my question was, where's the list of the self-imposed constraints that need to be unimposed in order to have the freedom of utilizing the monopoly issuing power that the government has by virtue of our constitutional rights, in order to achieve all those things that we agree that we need, that we want to do, all those good things. And many doctors there, of economics, been spouting, that complaint over a long period of time. You would think that they would have given one of their research assistants, one of their students, the job of enumerating. So my question was, where's the list of self-imposed constraints that needs to be unimposed in order for us to do that? And they all said, well, no, we don't really have that. We don't have that together. Well, here it is, almost 4 years later. It's not 4 years later, but it's 3.5 or more. It's more than 3.5 years later, and nobody still has it. And because nobody still has it, we continue to have these discussions about what modern monetary theory is and how it works with, or could work, along with monetary reform, which I am the monetary reform camper here. Okay. Now, having said that, I want to make one more observation, and it's this: there's a need for broader understanding among the monetary speakers. Okay, the speakers about monetaries, of any kind of doing any kind of reform to the money system. Now, modern monetary theory say they're not a reformer because they say all they do is describe the system that we have. That doesn't pass the straight face test at my house. Okay, the system that we have. So, having said that, I'm just saying that because that's where it's at with me. That modern monetary theory and monetary reformers need to be checking off their agreements and their disagreements with regard to how the money system works. So when I got expunged by Yves Smith, it was not in regard to so much as in the context of having a dialogue with Yves on a posting by Randy Ray on his great myth propagated about the Fed, the greatest myth being central bank independence. Now, among the comments that I had left on that particular blog, this was part 2 that we were talking about here. I said that central bank independence from government. The great noted, somewhere back there is E.A. Goldenweiser's American Monetary Policy, and in the book he addressed the issue of independence versus influence. And what he explained is that all of the concern about the influence working from Congress into monetary policy is ill-founded. That all of the influence goes in the other direction. It is the people who claim to understand money, therefore the bankers, that have all of the influence over the Congress, because the Congress knows that they don't know anything about money. So he says the concern about central bank independence is misplaced. It cannot work that way. And why? Because the money power resides in the private banks. So therefore they control they are the influence. Power and interests work according to their abilities to influence outcomes. So there they are. So that there it is. One of the comments that I made, now been expunged from existence. Okay. But Randy, in this second one, he decided to pull out one of the work that Stephanie Kelton had done at New Economics Perspectives, in which she brought in Frank Newman. Now here he's quoting her. So these words are from Stephanie's. Frank N. Newman, former Deputy Secretary of the Treasury, shed light on the way the Treasury views constraints on financing its deficits. This is the claim of a Treasury official. Quote, I recall from my time at the Treasury Department that the assumption was always that there was money in the Fed account to start with. Nobody seemed to know where it came from originally or when. Perhaps it was established in biblical times. I'm just going to leave it right there. Perhaps it was established in biblical times. So we're relying on the Fed. And because he used that, okay, quote, because Randy used that quote. This is how I started off my dialogue that Yves then jumped into, and we went down it until I was expunged from existence. So this was my first comment. I took the quote that Randy had used for his reference point. Quote, former Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Treasury says critics of MMT are reaching, end quote. New Economics Perspective, October 30th, 2013. You'll find many comments from me at that assumingly. This was my comment. A guy who made a 35-year career as CFO and CEO of the largest mega banks in the world, now head of one of China's major development banks, is characterized as a former Treasury official because he did his stint at Treasury. I wrote, likely helping with deregulation, in parentheses, conjecture. That was conjecture. Asked about where the money comes from, that the government spends, he answers, maybe from biblical times. Yeah, just the kind of support MM needs from Treasury, quote. How about getting one real Treasury official to agree with any of this? End of my comment. Okay? So my point is that, very simple, the guy's not a Treasury official. I don't know what he did at Treasury, okay? I don't know whether he worked on deregulation or not, but what I know is he obviously didn't know anything about money. And for MMT to be relying on him as the Treasury official from biblical times. So Yves Smith wrote in, wow, you don't get it, do you? Newman was sent to Bankers Trust, not a mega bank, but it eventually merged into one, Deutsche Bank, because BT, Bankers Trust, was in trouble. A big derivative scandal that I mentioned it in Econ. That means he was seen by the board as an official heavyweight. If you'd bothered to look at his bio, which clearly you didn't, he was number 2 at Treasury. That's a serious position in D.C. In general, people in banking and finance, or even at the Fed and Treasury, don't think much about how the money system works. I'm sorry, but I have to repeat that. In general, people in banking and finance, and even at the Fed and Treasury, don't think much about how the money system works. People in finance are almost universally neoliberal with a gold standard view of the world. Government has the same constraints as a household. And people in government are too busy with politics to think much about policy. Friends, seriously, the political elements of policy, as in who wins and who loses, overwhelm the policy elements of policy. That's the end of Yves' comment. I reply as Uncle Joe, and I took the quote. In general, people in banking and finance, and even at the Fed and Treasury, don't think much about how the money system works, end quote. Neither do economists. It is one of the cause for our peril that, broadly speaking, socioeconomics and political economics do not come through a study of the monetary system. For if they did, the winners and losers would soon be evident, and the present money power structure at risk. That is why Nobelist Dr. Frederick Soddy wrote The Role of Money, so that the people could understand how this debt peonage thing really works. I put a link there to The Role of Money, available free online. So, I wrote, Newman was a smart banker who knew nothing of the money system, but who hit Treasury at number 2. Gee, didn't his bio also mention that he was at Citibank, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America? Yeah, I had read his bio and his CV. My point was the Treasury expert's view was really that of a banker, and it was twice as ignorant as normal. Thanks. That was my response to Yves. So this is where the dialogue gets a little squirrely. Remember what I just said. Yves Smith. So now you're engaging in distortions to try and score points. The fact that Newman later came to understand what he was seeing and articulated it is laudable, but no, you engaged in an ad hominem attack and tried to discredit his later thinking. I didn't even know about his later thinking, nor did I know about his former thinking. So how am I trying to discredit it? I'm trying to discredit his own words. And if you can't discredit somebody's own words, what can you discredit? She writes on. And yes, I'm quite aware of Newman's background, but you were the one insinuating his position at Treasury was inconsequential. Keynes changed his mind in order to write the general theory. Very true. That's to be kept in mind by a lot of people who are criticizing monetary reform. Perhaps more germane, Irving Fisher, one of the most celebrated economists of the 20s, was famously remarked that stocks had reached a permanent plateau right before the Great Crash, became seriously depressed, and rethought everything he knew and came up with the theory of debt deflation. His original article stands up very well. I'm an Irving Fisher advocate. Irving Fisher is one of my heroes. I'm the one who's always getting told, hey, Irving Fisher didn't know anything about investment. I'm like, well, he was an economist, He wasn't an investment advisor. So I'm very much aware of his faults, despite the fact of Friedman calling him the greatest monetary economist of the last century. So then Eve goes on to write, since you choose to sit in judgment of Newman, his tenure at Bankers Trust was a failure. I thought you just brought him in because he was like the wisest guy in the world. He was unable to reform it out of its out-of-control culture, and the bank was embroiled in another scandal, at least one that predated Newman's arrival. That was what led to the sale to DB, Bankers Trust to Deutsche Bank. Newman apparently was quite depressed. I actually saw him at the gym, and he really did look miserable, which you hardly see men reveal in public. So he appears to have, unlike a lot of men who take big public defeats, the usual course is a determined effort to rehabilitate your image, a la Mike Milken, to have re-examined his prior thinking. And my question is, does that have anything to do with what I said? Now I'm going to give you my comment that you've never seen, because this was my comment replied to Eve, but in the meantime, she realized that Uncle Joe was Joe Bon Giovanni, and she stopped my comments as Uncle Joe. But this is what I wrote back. Eve, I never involved ad hominem attacks, and I never criticized any of Frank Newman's accomplishments as a banker. My point was the Treasury expert's view was really that of a banker, and that it was twice as ignorant as normal. MMT trots out your smart banker, to which I totally agreed, and pass him off as a Treasury official, confirming MMT's ideas about public debt, money, and taxes. When asked where the money came from that was in the TGA, he said he didn't know, just assumed it was always there, perhaps since biblical times. Either you agree that it makes sense that perhaps Treasury account balances have been around since biblical times, or Newman's response, as a former Treasury official, was exceedingly ignorant of where money comes from that goes into the TGA account. As for Newman's later thinking, it was never on my radar screen, so how could I try to discredit it? I care not about his success or failure at any of the banks he managed, nor about how his rehabilitation might inform his work for China. More credit to him for all that. You can call any of my comments ignorant, because they can be just as well. But that is not an ad hominem attack on me. I would hope to be able to respond, and I wish Frank Newman would clarify his biblical references. So that was my comment when I sent it. It didn't go anywhere. It didn't get into the blog. So that's it. I mean, that's a kind of almost like a typical dialogue that would happen between me and anybody else who I was debating. So my question is, where in there is anything like either an ad hominem attack or bad faith argumentation? More later. Soon. Thank you.